When we were taken into custody, I thought I was being saved, rescued. And then later on, I realized that we weren't being rescued at all, and that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last for 17 years.
Sonny Jacobs and her husband were jailed for murder. Sonny's husband was executed in the electric chair for the crime. But after 17 years, previously suppressed evidence was uncovered, proving them innocent of the crime. Sonny was released. But 17 years of her life are gone, and her husband is dead. Are some injustices too great to be forgiven? What does it mean to forgive? Hillary Carr reports.
The year was 1976. Sonny Jacobs received a call from Jesse Tefero, her common-law husband and the man of her dreams. Every once in a while, Jesse left to go earn some extra money for the family. Sonny didn't know how he earned it, and she didn't want to know. Jesse Tefero had promised Sonny this particular trip would be the last. But the business he was conducting with his friends in South Florida fell through, leaving him broke and in need of her help.
I packed up the kids in this old car that we had with a case of oil, because it was the kind of car that just spewed black smoke out behind it down the road, and every once in a while you had to stop and pour in another can of oil and spew more black smoke. And I drove with the kids, breastfeeding my daughter, singing songs to my son, driving.
After picking up Jesse, their old car broke down. So they called one of Jesse's friends, ex-con Walter Norman Rhodes. Rhodes eventually agreed to take them to another friend's house where they would wait for money to be wired from her parents. But it was getting late, so they pulled into a rest area to sleep. In the early morning hours, Trooper Philip Black and visiting Canadian Constable Donald Irwin stopped to do a routine check. In the process, ex-con Walter Rhodes shot and killed both officers.
And so I covered the children, and then when the shooting stopped, I looked up to see where Jesse was, to see if he was okay. And he was standing there now in the middle of the cars, and Walter Rhodes was running from around the cars with a gun in his hand, saying that we were to take the police car and to hurry.
Sonny wanted to stay behind, but because they were eyewitnesses to the murder, Rhodes threatened to kill them. He drove the terrified hostages to the parking lot of a retirement home, where he kidnapped an elderly man and stole his car.
We could hear the helicopters overhead, and I knew that we were rescued at that point because it was all over. I knew the police were onto us, and there was obviously a roadblock. And so when we got to where we could see the roadblock, Mr. Rhodes made some sort of snap last-minute decision, and he swerved hard to the left, I assume trying to avoid the roadblock, and that's when the police opened fire. They had a whole line of policemen with long guns, rifles of some sort, and they basically blasted the car. It was the most extraordinary thing, because I knew that they knew there were hostages in that car, and I didn't know at the time, but the man's wife had called the police, so they absolutely knew with certainty that there were hostages, including women and children, in the car.
Miraculously, Walter Rhodes was the only one hit in the barrage of gunfire. The police pulled him out of the car and placed him in an ambulance.
So they took Walter Rhodes out and put him in an ambulance. They brought the old man out of the car, and then they took Jesse out of the car and handcuffed him. I was standing in the crowd at that point watching. And then a policeman came out of the crowd with his gun turned around with the butt end forward and smashed Jesse in the side of the head and knocked him to the ground. At that point, I ran over and threw myself over him, because the man had raised his gun again, and it looked to me like he was going to just smash his head in. So I covered him with my body, and at that point, I was arrested and pulled off of Jesse, and they took the children in one car, and they took me in another, and Jesse in another, and on the ride to the substation, the first of, I think, 3 police stations that we were taken to before we were finally taken to the main one, they pulled off the side of the road to argue between them, the police, whether or not to take us in or to take us over to some railroad tracks. to kill us and say that we had tried to escape.
Fortunately, those who argued to take them in prevailed. Sunny was taken to the police station and not allowed to see her 9-year-old son or her 10-month-old daughter.
And I tried to tell them that she didn't know how to drink from a bottle, that she was nursing. No one would listen to me. And I never knew where she was taken, and I was never allowed to communicate that information to whoever was taking care of her until finally, after about a month, my parents were able to get the custody of my daughter, and then it took almost another month to get custody of my son, who was kept in a juvenile detention center in isolation because he was so young.
At the trial, the prosecution bolstered its case against Sunny by intimidating a cellmate arrested for possessing diet pills. They told her she could go free if she helped them get a conviction, but could face years in jail if she didn't.
It became apparent to me at that point in time that they weren't looking for truth. They were looking for conviction, and that things were not what they were supposed to be.
In order to avoid the electric chair, Walter Rhodes plea bargained for 3 life sentences in exchange for his incriminating testimony against Sunny and Jesse. Jesse Tefero's trial lasted only 4 days, after which he was convicted and sentenced to death. A jury found Sunny Jacobs guilty and sentenced her to life in prison. But the judge, a former highway patrol officer, overruled the jury and illegally sentenced her to death.
And I think he knew eventually that his sentence would be overturned, but that he would get a good chunk of my life in the meantime, and he did.
We'll have more of this amazing story when we come back.
Are you looking for a way to change your life? The answer may be as easy as watching TV. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that's designed to teach you to speak English. New opportunities will be available to you when you learn the language of the internet, commerce, travel, and diplomacy. No need to pay for your expensive schools or tutors. You can learn English by watching Hello Channel. Invest in yourself. For a brighter future, say hello.
On the basis of tainted evidence, Sunny Jacobs and her husband Jesse were convicted of killing 2 police officers. Both were sentenced to death.
I was very angry and very disillusioned. And I'd lost all faith in anything I'd been taught to believe in, including God. I was real mad at him. For letting this happen. I couldn't imagine. I had never hurt anyone in my entire life. I never even was in a fight. And now this. Basically, I spent the whole time in solitary confinement, which was also a form of sensory deprivation because there was no one there. They cleared out a building and put me in it. And I stayed in it. By myself, I was the only one who lived in that building. So the only sound I heard was the sounds that I made, and the only movement in the room, in the cell, was the movement that I created. And so at first I was very, very angry, and I paced the floor, and it was more like a tomb than a cell, really, because the walls were made of concrete block, and the floor was cement, and it had a solid metal door with a small window in it for them to observe me on an hourly basis, write down what I was doing, but they didn't communicate with me. They wouldn't even make eye contact with me, and it was in the rules that they not.
Sunny was given a Bible and a law book, pencil and paper, white pajamas, and a pair of shoes, and nothing else. She read the Bible, searching for answers by randomly opening it and reading whatever it had to say to her. Every day, it told her something she needed to know.
And so one day, it told me that they don't say when I die. They just don't say. They're not really in charge of that. And so I also realized that, in a way, I'd been given a gift. You see, because they were supplying my basic needs. I didn't have to cook, clean, work. I would have loved to be with my children, but I couldn't be. So I really had no responsibilities except one. And that was, whether my life be long or short, to become the best person that I could be. On death row, what happened was I connected. I connected with a source of strength that I guess you have to be pushed into a corner to even look for in your life. I think seeing the face of your own death has a sort of life-affirming effect, you know. It makes those days all the more precious and meaningful.
After 5 years on death row, the judge's illegal death sentence was overturned and Sunny was released into the general prison population. After 5 years of silence, she talked to her fellow inmates non-stop for 3 days until she lost her voice. She had visitors again, and her life had almost regained a sense of normalcy.
Then a year after I was released from death row, my parents decided that maybe they could go on a vacation for once and not have to come to prison. So they dropped my daughter off with Jesse's parents and went on for a holiday. And unfortunately, on the way, the plane crashed and they were killed. And that was the most difficult day of my life. My children were devastated once again. They lost their home and their security in the world. That was the most difficult thing for me. It was the children. I couldn't help them. I felt so helpless.
Then on May 4th, 1990, after 15 years of incarceration, Sunny Jacobs' husband, Jesse Tefero, was executed in the electric chair. After his execution, Sunny's lawyers found a statement by a prison guard who had overheard Walter Rhodes bragging that 2 people were on death row for murders he had committed. That statement had been hidden by the prosecution.
Jesse's lawyers said that had they had that statement before the execution, Jesse never would have been executed, and in fact, it would have been grounds for a new trial. So he might be alive today. Tomorrow, for the anniversary of his death, we might be celebrating instead. And that hurts me. It's hard for me. The first year that I was out on the anniversary, on his birthday, what would have been his birthday, and the anniversary of his death, there was no consolation for me because I was free and he should have been here.
17 years after Sunny and Jesse were sentenced to death, the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals was given proof that witness testimony had been falsified. The results of Walter Rhodes' lie detector test were also falsified. Additional evidence that would have cleared Sunny and Jesse had been suppressed. On October 19, 1992, Sunny's conviction was overturned and she was released from prison.
When I went in, I was a mother, 2 young children, a daughter, and a wife. I was in my 20s. When I came out, I was a widow and an orphan and a grandmother. Who can compensate you for that? Well, the answer is only you can compensate yourself, really. And in a way, maybe that's the answer in all cases. Only you can compensate yourself. So that's what I've chosen to do.
Sunny struggled with her loss, with her anger, and with a sense of betrayal. She was free, but after suffering so many wounds, how could she go on with her life? We'll find out when we talk to her here in the studio right after this.
Just say.
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 Hello.
We've been recounting the amazing story of Sunny Jacobs, who spent 5 years on death row and then an additional 12 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. Sunny, we're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
I'm very happy to be here.
The story ends with prison. You eventually get out of prison. What next?
Well, that's my favorite part.
Is it?
Actually, yeah, the getting out part. And police escorted me to the door with my little box of belongings. That was all I had after 17 years. And opened the door and handed me my box and told me to have a nice life. And I didn't know what to do because there was no one there to tell me. And, you know, in prison, someone always tells you what to do. So I walked over to the stairs and I hesitated because I thought, again, someone would surely say something. No one did. And I took a few steps down the stairs and again I waited. And There was no reaction, so I started down the stairs, and by the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, I was running. I ran down the stairs, and I ran down the street, and the sun and the moon were both out at the same time. You know, that moment, it was so perfect. And it was in the evening, and I thought, this moment was just made for me. The sun and the moon were there to celebrate the moment with me.
And yet, even at that moment, you have lost practically your whole world. You've lost your husband, Jesse. Your parents are gone. Essentially, you lost the childhood of your children. Why did you make the choice to forgive?
Well, on my own behalf, I did it for myself. Because if I was going to have a beautiful new life, it would be a shame to drag all that muck into it. Hatred and anger and grief and bitterness and revenge and all those negative things that just would hold me back.
How would you define, in its essence, forgiveness? What is forgiveness?
Letting go.
Just letting it out. Gone.
It's a choice, just like everything. It's the choice. It's choosing healing over revenge. It's choosing life over death. It's choosing to move forward rather than to look backward.
Just an intellectual choice? Okay, I choose to let go. No more. It's gone.
No, that's just the beginning.
So how do you do it?
The intellectual part is the decision. But then you have to get down into the deeper layers, and it has to become a spiritual process.
So, Sonny, who do you blame?
Blaming is useless. It's a waste of time, really. We can figure out what went wrong, but the main thing is to figure out how to fix it. And that's my focus.
So you never thought about blame?
Oh, sure I did. Oh, yeah, a lot in the beginning. But in order to move on, I got over it.
What
I
about
realized that the focus has to be on moving forward. Blame is looking backwards.
So revenge, just a little bit of revenge, or how much revenge satisfies a heart?
Well, that's the point. There is never enough. That's the whole point. I'm glad you asked me. That there's never enough as far as revenge goes, and I've seen that over and over again in different circumstances. So, for me, revenge is not as important as healing. You got to choose, and I chose healing.
I'm sure people who hear your story ask, well, why in the world is that woman not angry? You're not angry, are you?
Occasionally, but that's when I realize I need to do the work again. Because anger takes the place of much more joyful things that I would rather fill my life with.
And when you say do the work again, that means just revisiting forgiveness? Is forgiveness something you just keep revisiting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's
You got
a
to come back
process.
to it again and again.
Yeah, it's like posture. You know?
Stand up straight.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have to. Oh, there I go again.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I can.
The justice in all of this. Where's the justice?
Just us. That's it.
Oh, I like that. Just us.
Just us.
Oh, what's that mean?
That means that if we each individually take up our responsibility to see that we are just to one another, that's the only justice we're really going to find in this lifetime. Hopefully, social justice will follow.
Should I try to find justice for others?
I think really if each of us concentrated on ourselves, then it would be a better job.
And I can't always find justice for me.
Yeah. It's sort of like a story that someone told me in Ireland about the father and daughter trapeze artists. And she said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll look out for you and you look out for me and we'll be okay." And he said, "No, daughter, you look out for you and I'll look out for me and then we'll be all right." And I think the justice and forgiveness are sort of like that. But I think, yes, once you decide that you will live a just life, you visit it upon all of those with whom you have dealings.
Is it possible that in this life, justice sometimes is never really done?
And the only justice that you can really count on is the justice that you give yourself. Justice is up to us. So, punishment isn't up to us so much. Revenge, saith the Lord, I believe, shouldn't be up to us. So we have to give ourselves justice. In my personal tragedy, I got to a point where I felt that in order to honor the lives that were lost, my own life included, the lives, all the possible lives I could have had, Jesse's life, my parents' lives, my children's lives that they could have had. In order to honor those, it didn't serve me to hold on to the anger and the bitterness and the resentment and the right to compensation. I should be compensated, you see. But I realized that the only one who could compensate me was me. And in this situation, for me to take their mother from them too and replace her with a miserable, old, bitter woman sitting there waiting to be compensated, that's not justice. The only justice that I could bring to the situation was to give them a loving, joyful, open person who can show them, who can be an example to them of what you can do when a tragedy happens and you have nothing and you pick yourself up and you move on and you make it better. And that's what forgiveness did for me. And that's the justice in this situation. I make that. That's my choice. And everybody has that choice. I can't make the whole world right. This big, that's the only part of the world that I control. And within that sphere, I can make the world right. And that's great.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Sonny Jacobs, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
God bless you. Would you like to learn more about Sonny's story and her remarkable insights into forgiveness? Sign on to our website, The Evidence, that's one word, theevidence.org, and you'll find additional information we didn't have time for in this episode. We'll be back with some final thoughts right after this.
Learn English and have fun on Hello Channel.
We know where they've taken her.
In a defining time, amid a noble quest, a bond is forged.
We are here to save the princess.
But the princess is sleeping.
Imagine what a little time can do for your family.
The princess is sleeping.
Oh, sorry. Excuse us.
Shh. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Sonny Jacobs' story stretches the quality of forgiveness to its human limits. But it's people like Sonny, people who have suffered terrible injustices, who show us that forgiveness is the way to rise above the pain, the way out of the anger and bitterness. Human instincts usually send us in the opposite direction. We want to hang on to that hurt, that sense of outrage. We want someone to pay so that we can feel better. But in the end, no one can pay enough to heal our hurt. Atheists and believers alike question how, in the face of so much pain, so much suffering and injustice, how can a loving God possibly exist? But could it be that the human ability to forgive such deep wrong itself comes from the heart of one who offers ultimate forgiveness? Sonny believes the answer is yes. It's stories like Sonny's that persuade me that God does exist, God does care. For me, it's easy to believe in a God who loves like that. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence. Do you ever suspect that life is a one-sided game run by some invisible mastermind? That you're merely a pawn on his chessboard, moved around by his will and his whim, without any real choice of your own? Do we really have free choice? Or are we merely passive little puppets with God pulling all the strings? Today we're going to take a closer look at this matter of our free will and see if we can get off this chessboard. Welcome to The Evidence. I'm Dwight Nelson. Okay, here's the picture from the first chapter of Genesis. God creates Adam and Eve. He puts them in the Garden of Eden, and He forbids them to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then He allows them to be tempted. As a God who sees the end from the beginning, He had to know what would happen. Did He purposely set them up for a fall? Were they bound to eat the forbidden fruit? Did they have a choice? Did they have free will, or were they being manipulated by God's sovereign will? Theologians have devoted entire books to questions like these, and we've got only a half hour in The Evidence to wrestle with that question. But I'm grateful that joining me to help us think through this issue is Dr. Gene Sheldon from Pacific Union College up in Northern California. Gene, nice to have you.
Thank you, Dwight.
This is the $6 million question. God, all-knowing as He is, sees the future, knows that Adam and Eve are going to crash and burn. Why did He even bother creating them?
Well, it seems to me in order to understand that question, it is the most important and probably the most difficult question to answer in the universe. But in order to do that, we need to lay everything out on the table, because God is more than just foreknowledge. He has power, foreknowledge, and moral character.
Okay.
Now, power is something that's very important, and we tend to think about God in terms of being all-powerful.
He can do it all.
He can do it all.
Yeah, everything.
And He knows it all, the idea that He knows it all. And then moral character. But when we talk...
When you say moral character, what do you mean?
Moral character meaning that what drives God may not be power, may not be foreknowledge,
but some idea?
but may be the way He is. And in terms of love, in terms of truth, honesty, and in terms of freedom.
Okay.
And if that's the case, maybe it complicates the picture somewhat.
So God has all those three: power,
Foreknowledge,
moral character. And He still creates Adam and Eve knowing they're going to crash and burn. So what's going on?
Well, it seems to me that if His ultimate goal is to not have beings that are programmed but freely love Him, then perhaps what drives Him then, as I said, is His character, and that controls His power and His foreknowledge.
So what part of His character is controlling this? I mean, what's at work here? He has a tree. Okay, I mean, we have the story. He has a tree. And He says, don't go to the tree. What's He doing? I mean, it's like telling a child, I have two kids, and when they were young, stay away, and the moment you say stay away, the child goes. So God has set them up for failure. What's going on here?
He's also set them up for choice.
So it's the issue of choice. The tree's there for choice. In what way?
To give us the privilege of saying no to God.
So it's like a voting booth.
Yeah.
You go to the tree, no. Stay away from the tree, you're saying yes to me.
And that is all driven by a sense that true morality cannot exist apart from freedom of choice. That is, if I love someone simply because I'm controlled, then I cannot be it is not totally genuine.
And Gene, this isn't only a theological concept, is it? It's a political concept. We talk about democracy where you have choices. We're big on choices. Yeah. So God apparently is big on choices too.
But I wonder how many who go to the voting booths are really making a freely given, thoughtful choice, or whether they're just following the crowd.
And would that be true morally as well?
Exactly.
Yeah. This whole issue of human freedom and choice, I want to come back to that. And I want to invite somebody to join us when we come back. We'll have Dr. Frank Gonzalez joining us with Dr. Gene Sheldon. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
I learn English, you can also on Hello Channel.
Our next guest is Dr. Frank Gonzalez, a theologian whose voice is heard in many parts of North America and throughout much of South and Central America as well. He is the speaker of La Voz de la Esperanza, the voice of hope.
That was very well said.
Frank, good to have you at our table.
Thank you, sir.
We've been having a conversation here, Gene, Sheldon, and I, about God's foreknowledge. So he makes this pair in the garden, knowing that they're going to fall. God's faced with an ethical choice. Gene, let's just pick up where we left off. What's that ethical choice for God?
It's power versus moral character, in my opinion. In other words, I have the power to do something, but is it the right thing to do? And can I limit my power for the sake of some greater purpose, or must I act a certain way just because I have the power to do it?
But then, Frank, knowing the future, foreknowledge, God's foreknowledge, does that make the future have to be because God knows it? Is he causing the future by knowing it?
This is a question that many theologians have debated.
You're right.
God is trying, remember, to do things in His image. And He is trying to produce humans, not robots. He is trying to bring heaven to earth, and He is trying to create real individuals. And we as parents know that, we would prefer to program our kids' activities from the morning to the evening. We would like to tell them everything that they should say and they should do. But
and make that bed every single day.
And you know what? It would probably work to some extent. But we would have something other than real children. We would develop something that is akin to ourselves, but something that's not real and true. For a person to be true, that person has to make true choices. And
so the fact that God knows that you're going to make that choice in advance is not making you make that choice.
Absolutely
is what you're saying.
not.
No. I think that's very true, and it seems to me that the choices that we make, if in any way they are programmed or manipulated, they're not real, genuine choices.
How so?
Well, if I'm told to love my mom, for example, say I'm a child and I'm told to love my mom, and I say, I love you, Mom, but that isn't my free, voluntary response. It's simply I've been told to do it. Then I'm not actually morally responding in love. I'm simply doing what I've been told to do. So if God, by His foreknowledge, actually controls me, something like the law of command, where He's actually setting it down, you have to stop at that stoplight and cross the road there and turn left, whether you want to or not. If that's predeterminate, and I make that move, it's not free and it's not real. I've simply been put there. Likewise, if I'm told, because I've chosen for you to love me, therefore you must, and I do, it's not real love.
But then let's go to the barrio, Frank. Okay, we'll go to the street, because maybe I'm still in the jam. 5 generations behind me, all alcoholics. I'm an alcoholic. I didn't have a choice. I got forced into this.
Yes. Look, in the barrio, we want God to pull some strings, because too many things, too many entities are pulling all the wrong ones. And what we have is a situation where people are seemingly enslaved to an environment in which they find themselves in. They can't break out of that shelf. All of the studies demonstrate that if you're the son of an alcoholic, you have the proclivity, not only in terms of having watched the modeling of a father doing it, but actually genetically, you have a proclivity. You don't even...
So am I really free to choose then? Because I'm bound by my genes.
The son of an alcoholic does not have the choice of being a social drinker, if there is such a thing. But some people say that exists. If that exists, that is not a choice that the son of an alcoholic can make, because one drop of alcohol will make him an addict.
Then I'm not as free as Adam and Eve. God has me in a box. I'm bound by the past.
Yes.
So how do I get out of this box?
I think there's a danger in projecting back to Adam and Eve the things that hamper us today.
Okay.
We can talk about that, but clearly they came from a non-dysfunctional father and a non-dysfunctional background, and they weren't hampered with the things that we are hampered with, and they didn't have the pulls and the tugs in their soul and in their system that the kids have today.
And it seems to me that given that God gave us the freedom of choice as part of His image, then we have the freedom to create our children with all kinds of problems, and thus limit their freedom and actually shortchange them in terms of the image of God. And it seems to me that that's what has happened generation after generation, is that instead of creating our children in the image of God, we have actually had the freedom to degenerate them.
And freedom to do what? Because our moral clarity is impaired. You know, when I came to this country, one of the sayings that took my attention was that one that says, and it's very American, it's American as apple pie. You won't find it any place else in the world.
Really?
There but for the grace of God go I. It is an admonition, because our instinct when we see bad people doing bad things and atrocities being committed is to say with a tone of moral arrogance, oh, I'm glad I'm not like them, you see. So when we watch the Kosovo massacres and the Serbs and the Albanians at each other's throats and
war in Iraq,
burning the villages or this or that, we say, we're not like them. But see, no one burned the homes in our village. No one killed our parents. No one violated our women. We did not grow up with being fed stories of atrocities from the time of the Ottoman Empire. And so when you have been subjected to certain situations, that becomes part of your moral vision.
It does, and it's a part of your the baggage that you carry into the future.
Absolutely.
And I want to come back to the moral implications, Gene and Frank, of that baggage. We need to take a break right now. Look, if we've really lost moral freedom because of the sins of our parents, we're talking about the genetic code, our grandparents, great-great-grandparents, whoever, is there any way to regain that free human choice? That's going to be our question when the evidence continues in just one moment.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
I'm here with Dr. Gene Sheldon and Dr. Frank Gonzalez. We're talking about temptation and free choice. All right. You both agree that we've been programmed with this ability to choose within our human system. God values it, Gene. I think you said He values it. It's an ethical value. He cannot live without it. Let's talk about moral choices, Frank. With all the genetics behind me, you used once, I heard you talk about a room.
Yes.
I like that metaphor. Share that with me again.
It's not original with me. It's professor, I don't know which professor I had, but I think it's a classic illustration to show that even though we have this free will, it is severely impaired by what we've talked about, heredity, things that happen to us and so forth. And it is akin to telling a person, go into this room. Now, in this room, it's pitch dark, but you will find that there are these bottles, and all of the bottles have venom but one, which is clearly labeled. We want you to drink, of course, the non-poisonous one. Now the person has a choice, you know, somewhat of a choice. The bottles are there, they're clearly marked, but there's a problem that is impairing that choice, which is the lack of light.
There's no light in that room.
There's no light in that room.
So you have to choose in the dark that one bottle that is life. Yeah. Now, how does that illustrate our moral dilemma?
Well, the way that hits me is that, hey, we need something that will turn the switch on, so that choice will be truly free. Because if I can see things clearly, if I can have the moral clarity, if I can see those bottles for what they are, then and only then am I in the position to make a real free and empowered decision.
That's a fascinating point, because that would suggest that actually, Gene and Frank, God's intervention in the human experience is an act of freeing rather than binding. He's actually enabling us to make a free choice. Yeah. How has God intervened in the human situation? I mean, what does that take us to?
You know what just came to me?
What?
Free will is not only, free there is not only an adjective,
yes,
it's a verb. Free the will.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
So God gave us free will, adjective at the beginning, but as this will became impaired through the realities of a corrupt world and all of the things that have happened, now we need God to free
the will.
The will.
Ooh.
And the statement of the Bible, the good news is that God has done that, that He has taken responsibility, that He did send His Son, that something cosmic, something for every person happened there.
And that had and all of that somehow contributes to my human freedom to choose.
In fact, John, the gospel writer, uses, going back to our light metaphor of the room, he uses that verb. He says, He is the light, talking about Jesus, which lighteneth every man that cometh into this world. And consequently, something happened with the coming of Jesus that is meant to liberate us from even our free will, which is no longer free to make the right, the moral, and the clear choices as it was for Adam and Eve.
So, Gene, how do I, as a human creature, respond to that God act that Frank has just described? I mean, what do I do?
First of all, I think Jesus talked about being drawn by the light.
Yes.
And Jesus is the light. And as a revelation of the character of God, He draws us to the Father, actually, through Himself. So His words, you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free, means that our focus then has to be on Him as the light of the world. And
is that drawing that God is exerting on me, is that still honoring my free choice?
well, certainly light can shine on you. You may reject it. And it seems to me that we need to go back a little bit maybe to the fall and to recognize that what happened in the Garden of Eden wasn't just about an apple or a fruit, but it was about the ingestation, actually, of certain concepts about God and about personal value that set us up for all the addictive behaviors and all of the blaming and the guilt that we have gone through. And that by Jesus coming and enlightening us regarding those very basic concepts about ourselves and about God that we have bought into, then we can be set free. And once we value ourselves, we're less likely to take those bottles of poison. Because I think God could even shine light in the room of those bottles, and we still choose.
Still grab for the
Still grab the poison.
X on the
That's
bottle.
right.
Yeah. So Frank, what do I do? Okay, so I'm the one seeking this ultimate freedom. What do I need to do?
There's something you need to look at. I mean, the Bible is the only book that I know that says that something can happen to you by just looking.
Look at what? What should I look at?
In Isaiah, God says, "Look at me and be ye saved." But in the New Testament, it's more specific. It has to do with the cross.
Yeah, how do I look at the cross?
Behold the Lamb of God.
So how do I do that, though? Come on, I'm a skeptic, and you're enticing me. I want to do something.
Well,
what do I do?
Look at what happened there, the claims of the gospel. The claims of the gospel is that God did something for you there while you were an enemy, while you were hostile or indifferent. God is not waiting for you to do something in order for Him to do something for you. That's the good news of the gospel. He has liberated you. He has lifted you from condemnation to freedom. He has put you from being a slave to to the things that of your heredity and the things that cost you bondage. He has given you freedom. So it comes with believing that something has happened already, not that you need to do something.
And
but
that in that God gift, my ultimate freedom can be experienced.
Yes, yes. And within that we are promised the Holy Spirit, which is sent to us to help us with this vision, this light, this moral clarity.
Frank and Jean, thank you for helping us tackle really it's a gut issue of the human journey. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm going to be right back with some final thoughts. Stay with us.
Learning a new language can be difficult and discouraging, but it doesn't have to be. Hello, I'm Karen, introducing Hello Channel, the revolutionary new channel designed especially to teach English. If you can speak English, the future is open for you, since speaking English means greater opportunity and higher paying jobs. By watching Hello Channel, you are immersed in this valuable language. You'll hear the words being spoken. You'll see the speakers' mouths when they say the words. You'll read what's being spoken in large, clear subtitles. And you'll speak out loud, practicing what you have just learned. There is no better or faster way to learn a language than total immersion. Hello Channel does exactly that. There's programming on every level so you can watch the shows that are just perfect for you. Whether you've spoken a little English, a great deal of English, or none at all, the Hello Channel has something for everyone. Join us for a convenient, affordable, and fun way to shape your future. There's so much in store for you if you'll just say hello.
Have you ever wished there were no such thing as free will? Maybe you think you'd be better off if God would simply take over your life and run it for you, kind of like a benevolent dictator. That way you'd have no temptations, no alternatives, and no wrong choices to make. Of course, that also means you'd have no mistakes to learn from, no lessons from experience, no way to develop moral qualities that differentiate human from beast, and no way to grow in a personal relationship with your Creator. But here's great news. There's a positive alternative for every one of us. By believing in Jesus Christ and depending on His saving grace to free us from bondage to our sinful nature, we can find the kind of liberty God intended for human beings to have when He created our first parents. This is truth, and this truth will set us free. I'm Dwight Nelson, and that's what I believe. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.
I'll tell you what my life was like without faith. I wished I could have died.
Faith is one of those words like religion that people tend to associate with their grandmothers. Today we often use words like spirituality or energy instead. But there is a growing number of people finding a certain richness, a history of suffering and joy that still resonates when we hear the word faith.
Faith is more than like this magical, mystical thing that we cannot see.
Faith has become that calm peace that I live every day of my life.
Faith is a commitment to the eternal.
Faith is actually how I function in life.
There's an element of trust in faith.
I think faith is organic to life.
Faith to me is putting my trust and belief in something that is outside of myself.
It gives my life meaning. It gives me vision for the future. And it gives me a lot of hope.
It's a choice to believe as opposed to skepticism or cynicism.
Faith is love, and so it's necessary to me.
We were created to believe in something outside of ourselves.
Whatever your definition of faith, there's no question that faith matters to the people who have experienced it. One of those who has not only experienced faith but studied it is Wade Clark Roof. After writing 8 books on religious trends in the United States, he's considered a leading expert. He had this to say about faith.
Faith is important because it provides anchor for one's life. Faith says, in effect, when all else fails, this you can believe in.
Faith matters because I know enough about life to know that just what I have inside myself and to offer is not going to cut it.
The popular idea of faith is that it's a leap into darkness, that it is a jump from objective reality to some subjective myth or unseen thing. But I think that faith is actually a leap into the light.
Faith is important, but if I weren't raised with it, how do I go about getting it? Edie Hughes didn't discover faith until she was an adult.
My journey to faith has been an extremely long journey. It's been the majority of my life. I grew up thinking I had to do things to have faith. I had to be the good person. I had to do all the right things. I had to work. It's only been the last few years that I finally understood that there's nothing, absolutely nothing I can do to have faith except to give my life to God. Once I did that and understood it, my faith has grown by leaps and bounds.
At one time I thought maybe I am an atheist, maybe I don't believe in God. But that didn't last long because I found that there were too many unanswered questions, and I have more questions in my mind trying not to believe in God than I did when I put my belief in God. And so it was easier to believe than not to believe. And I just didn't have enough faith not to believe.
Faith can be a powerful thing, but for some, living with faith may seem harder than living without it. Is faith, no matter how nice an idea, simply naive? Science and our ability to reason are the tools that teach us the truth about the world. Or do they?
There was hope at one time that science and rationalism would answer life's most important questions. And they were able to answer a lot of important questions, like the what questions, what are things made of, or the how questions, how did things come to be here? But they've been unable to answer the why questions. Why do I exist? Why does anything exist? And the only hope of any kind of meaningful answer then is rooted in faith. I have to believe.
I think it's built into the human situation that we want to believe in a power higher than ourselves.
If there's nothing beyond the here and now and the things that I can see, that looks incredibly empty to me.
Faith embraces the total truth, beyond our immediate reality, beyond the seen, beyond what you can feel and sense.
I want to use reason as a tool, but there are times wherein the human mind is simply not capable of the tasks. For instance, the mystery of God and there will be a failure of reason to comprehend. And in those times, I have to suspend rational judgment and allow faith its freedom and its creativity to embrace a God I cannot fully comprehend.
The only thing I can say to people is surrender. You have to come to the point where you're willing to give up all of it.
Without faith, I think I would shrivel and die. I would become something less than human. I would stop living. I might exist, but I would stop living.
Wings on a bird point to the reality of air. Sunflowers facing the sun point to the reality of light. Built into the human heart is a longing everyday life doesn't satisfy. That longing points to the reality of a God to have faith in. When we come back, we'll talk to Houston Smith, probably the most eloquent and respected world authority on why faith matters today.
Are you looking for a way to change your life? The answer may be as easy as watching TV. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that's designed to teach you to speak English. New opportunities will be available to you when you learn the language of the internet, commerce, travel, and diplomacy. No need to pay for your expensive schools or tutors. You can learn English by watching Hello Channel. Invest in yourself. For a brighter future, say hello.
Houston Smith is the author of the best-selling book, The World's Religions, a standard textbook in universities across the land. And in fact, Dr. Smith, I should have brought my copy from college and had you autograph the book. There isn't hardly an American student that has not been acquainted with that best-selling book. But you have been active in writing. I hold here in my hands his latest book, Why Religion Matters, The Fate of the Human Spirit in an Age of Disbelief. PBS a few years ago, you did a 5-part series with Bill Moyers.
Right.
11 honorary doctoral degrees. We are delighted to have you here at The Evidence.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, I suppose your fascination with world religion had something to do with the fact that you were born in China?
Well, it did actually, but more directly, it had to do with my parents, but they would not have been parents of sterling and powerful faith had they not had that faith to propel them to go to China and spread that faith to others.
So you were first, obviously, very significantly affected by your own parents' faith.
Absolutely. I have been a teacher all my life, and I find many of my students that their religious institution, church or synagogue, rubbed them the wrong way. And they picked up a lot of negativity. But mine was totally different. When I asked them, well, what do you have against religion? They say, first, it's dogmatic.
All right.
We've got the truth, and everybody else is going to hell in a wheelbarrow. Mm-hmm. And second, it's moralistic. Don't do this, that, and the other thing. That's not what came through to me from Christianity through my parents. It was rather, we're in good hands, and in gratitude for that fact, it will be well if we bear one another's burden. Now, and with all my gallivanting through these other religions, I've never come upon a formula that has stayed in place as well as that has.
Let me ask you, speaking of these world religions and a formula, is there one definition of faith that fits all religions?
Well, I would say yes. It's like a theme with variations, but the theme that runs through faith, wherever it is used, is trust.
Okay.
And if you ask what it means to be a man or woman of faith, the basic answer is that trust is built in to your makeup.
What's the difference between faith and religion?
Religion is organized faith. I would say there is no religion that is not based on faith, and a specific faith, because then we get into the variations. The common theme that runs through is trust. But trust in what? How do you articulate that? That differs from within the various religions.
Have we outgrown this organized faith, as you described it a moment ago, as you described religion? Have we outgrown it?
I do not think so. Human beings are homo, that's the Latin for human being,
right.
Religiosus. We are the religious animal.
The religious organism. The religious
Why are
animal.
we religious organism? We were made by the divine, and as such we carry the image of the divine within the product, within ourselves.
I see.
And when in Genesis it says that God breathed upon the creature that He'd made, breathed the Spirit. That Spirit is the Spirit of God. And that is the fundamental, most fundamental element in our nature. Deeper than sexuality, deeper than jealousy, envy.
Is that the common ingredient to all religion?
Well, we have variations. Always, in the study of comparative religion, all the important points come out as, I've already said, theme and variation. So yes, that is the common theme.
You've spent your life studying world religion.
Yeah.
You've spent your life examining faith or trust, as you just defined.
I've been very fortunate.
What difference has religion made in your life?
Well, we all understand each ourselves imperfectly. So I won't say that I'm a clear image to myself, but as I understand it, it's made all the difference. It's the difference between living in a palace and living in a hovel, or maybe living in a prison. And how can a difference that great not impact a life very importantly? So I feel like it's the most important element in shaping me.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Smith, and we're going to be joined by a very dear friend of his, Dr. Obadiah Harris, a philosopher. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Learning a new language can be difficult and discouraging, but it doesn't have to be. Hello, I'm Karen, introducing Hello Channel, the revolutionary new channel designed especially to teach English. If you can speak English, the future is open for you, since speaking English means greater opportunity and higher paying jobs. By watching Hello Channel, you are immersed in this valuable language. You'll hear the words being spoken. You'll see the speakers' mouths when they say the words. You'll read what's being spoken in large, clear subtitles. And you'll speak out loud, practicing what you have just learned. There is no better or faster way to learn a language than total immersion. Hello Channel does exactly that. There's programming on every level so you can watch the shows that are just perfect for you. Whether you've spoken a little English, a great deal of English, or none at all, the Hello Channel has something for everyone. Join us for a convenient, affordable, and fun way to shape your future. There's so much in store for you if you'll just say hello.
We're talking with Houston Smith, author of Why Religion Matters and noted teacher on the subject of religion. Now we're joined by his good friend, Dr. Obadiah Harris. Welcome, Dr. Harris. You are president of the Philosophical Research Society, Los Angeles.
That's right.
Gentlemen, with you sitting right there together, let's plunge into this business of religion and science. Two competing worldviews, are they? Would you say competing worldviews?
I would.
In what ways?
Well, I would say that up until the rise of modern science, why, they fit together like hand in glove. That science dealt with what we could pick up with the empirical evidence of what we can pick up with our senses, this world, you might say, and religion dealt with what is greater than this world. But now they have fallen into positions of antagonist. And the reason is that science's successes in the material world have been so mind-boggling that we have slipped into the mistake of thinking that because it has done such miracles with the material world, it is the omnicompetent window to truth and can tell us the truth about the whole world.
Which
that
means
is not so.
Which means we have the tendency to conclude that science, with all its achievements, really answers the ultimate questions, and we don't need anything beyond science.
That's the assumption. Answers them, or else they are unanswerable. In other words, whatever answers can be forthcoming come from science. Now that is dead wrong.
Now, Obadiah, dead wrong, Houston says, and you were very quick to state absolutely incompatible.
Yes, and I think that they are incompatible so long as science insists on being the sole proprietor of knowing what is reality. You see, it's the word reality that separates us.
Okay.
As if that which is immanent is real, that which is transcendent is unreal. If a scientist will take a little bit of humility and simply admit that there are some things they don't know about that may be real, then you have compatibility.
Well, you're not suggesting an intellectual arrogance, are you?
Yeah, I think I am. I think there is an intellectual arrogance and a dogmatism that is attached to science today because they do not want to consider that reality can have any other definition than the physical properties that we understand as reality.
I'm curious, Houston, world religions. Is this unique to Western thought that science and religion are kept apart? Eastern thought, would it bring science and religion together, or is science even a worldview to be contended with outside of the West?
Well, this is a conflict only in the Western world.
I see.
And the rest of the world, insofar as it is taking on Western modes of thought. But the rest of the world hasn't been shaped as much as we have by modern science and the controlled experiment, so it's not nearly the conflict there.
How would you make the case, Obadiah, then, to a scientist with an appeal to trust? Houston a moment ago defined faith ultimately as trust. How would you make the case for a scientist to trust?
I would say that every scientist has ultimate trust. They wouldn't even get into an experiment if they didn't trust. So trust.
Trust what?
Well, trust the laws of the universe.
Okay.
So in that way, we do have something deeply in common, in a trust in the reliability of the laws of the universe. Every experiment they make has its foundation in that trust.
Then what step would a scientist need to take to move from trusting the laws of the universe to trusting a personal being?
Well, I think that's a big leap for most scientists.
Too big?
Too big for the scientists that I have known.
There's a metaphor I like. It's as though we human beings were in a gigantic balloon, and we have flashlights, and those are metaphors for the scientific method. And we can shine our flashlights on anything inside the balloon, but there's no way we can get our flashlights outside the balloon to determine where the balloon is in space.
So you're suggesting science operates inside the balloon, religion is what reaches outside that balloon.
Very well put. And if only we would recognize what that metaphor says, we would be past this whole agonizing antagonism and become partners, each recognizing that there's something that the other can do that it itself cannot do.
Obadiah Harris, Houston Smith, what a delight to have you on The Evidence.
A great pleasure.
Thank you very much. This is a subject that I'm sure you would enjoy digging deeper into. We have a website. It's just one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. Click onto that website. The issue of faith and religion. It's one of the pivotal issues in life today. Check it out. We're going to be right back after a moment with some concluding thoughts.
This is Hello Channel. Come learn English as you watch TV. It will change your life.
Sometimes faith can seem like a distant memory. Sometimes God can seem like someone we just can't imagine anymore. And yet people continue to rediscover Him. In fact, they encounter God with all the wonder of a wide-eyed child. According to the individuals who've talked about their experiences in this program, it's possible to remember again, to make faith work in our world today. You know, I think we sometimes subconsciously resist faith, resist trust. We won't quite allow ourselves to give in to a friendly universe. Maybe we've been disappointed. Something bad happened that we don't understand. Maybe we think we have good reasons for our misgivings. But have you ever asked yourself if chronic doubt isn't sometimes a form of sulking? We're like the child who refuses to come to the dinner table because we didn't get our way. We feel that God has let us down, and we're not going to give Him the satisfaction of showing up when He calls. But the people of faith we've heard from tell us, maybe it's better to come to the table, to stop standing in the corner. Maybe we've simply misunderstood our Father. And maybe with a new understanding, we'll realize that God can be trusted, that He is worthy of our faith. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.
Prayer for me is a conversation with someone with whom I'm passionately involved.
Prayer's waking up to the reality that's there. And God, there's no reality greater than God.
Prayer is opening the heart to God as to a friend.
Prayer for me is just that daily dancing or dirging or whatever it is in my experience with God.
I think prayer is an attitude. I think prayer is a state of mind. And as opposed to viewing prayer as something we do, I think prayer and a prayerful attitude is something you are.
goes to his spiritual master and says, I've been trying to faithfully devote a whole hour a day to prayer, but my problem is I've got 3 kids and a demanding job, and there's hardly any time left at the end of the day for my wife. Tell me, what should I do? To which the master replies, pray 2 hours a day. So what is prayer? And why do so many people consider it time well spent?
When I pray, I'm not talking to somebody out there, a being that I've never seen or known. I am talking with someone who is passionately involved in my life also.
It's not just like a subordinate relationship. It is, but it's more than that. It's a relationship of friends that God wants most of all to be our friend and to have an intimate connection with us.
I pray because I need to be heard and I need to hear, and because I get lonely.
I think of prayer as my responding to the presence of God. And the presence of God is undeniable. So it's only natural I'm going to respond. Just as if my husband is in the room, I am going to respond to his presence in that room.
I like the image of a grandma God. I had the kind of a grandma who was padded and comfortable and could take you in her lap and could give you cookies and was a very comforting person. And I'm sure that my own grandmother has helped me see the comforting part of God.
A person's image of the divine often determines what kind of relationship they have with God and how they pray. Some people believe that just a quick check-in at the beginning and end of day is enough. And others believe it's an all-day conversation, like John Street, the mayor of Philadelphia.
I mean, I can't sort of get up in the morning and pray and then, come to work and say, well, I'll get back to that when I get home at night.
Well, there's a New Testament verse that says to pray without ceasing. And that always used to lay a guilt trip on me. But now that I'm growing to see that prayer is more just a part of being present to God and remembering God's presence to me in my everyday life, that means when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling happy and joyous, or when I'm, all the varieties of human emotions, God accompanies me in those.
There's some days when I don't even want to be around God. There's some days when I wake up in the morning, there are people who wring their hands and say, oh, I didn't say my prayer today. And I think, some days I wake up and I say, God, I love you, but I'm out of here, later for you. And I know that he's never leaving me. But I want to be in an authentic relationship with him that I say, I need my space today, and he will respect it. And he does. That's the kind of God that I know. And so prayer is being engaged in this kind of relationship with this one that I can trust to respect my needs and teach me how to respect the needs of others.
People find different ways to stay in touch with God. Sometimes they go so far as to develop special techniques to keep connected. Some of these techniques can be quite creative.
I used to have a very small speaker that was hooked up to, like a little boombox, a little stereo. And I'd have that speaker right under the desk. And I would play tapes. And I was the only one who could hear it. And I've actually been in meetings and had people, very, very agitated. And I'm hearing the music and they're saying what they have to say. It's not like I'm not listening and I'm not concerned, but I need to be in a certain frame of mind.
I think God is always present, and that presence is healing and comforting and loving and warm, maybe sometimes confronting, but generally it's a very supportive, perhaps parental kind of presence, but often we aren't aware of it. And I think in our praying, we become aware of it.
Someone once said God was in the details, the little things of life, the things we take for granted. For many people, prayer is a way to sense God's presence in the most ordinary moments of life.
So I'm cooking a meal or doing laundry. It's, God, thank you for these clothes that I can wash. Thank you for the food I can prepare. I'm wanting to learn more about experiencing God just in my everyday chores. I think that's really where prayer's at for me right now.
You may need to stop and breathe deeply to really appreciate the air. And so prayer is a stopping to breathe deeply of the presence of God.
There may be as many definitions of prayer as there are people who pray. When we come back, we'll take a deeper look at prayer and its power to change people's lives.
For a brighter future, just say hello.
One of my most joyous forms of prayer is to sing.
Sometimes it's just sitting down quietly. A lot of driving and praying, with my eyes open though.
But I'd say when I was a little kid, I definitely prayed in a more paternal, maternal sense. And now I think I pray knowing more of who and what God is for me.
I thought of prayer before as asking for something, and now I've realized, for me, prayer is accepting what already is.
So it's opened my eyes that I may see the glorious reality that's really here.
My life is a prayer, of course. Yeah.
Is prayer just the power of positive thinking, or does it really make a difference? I mean, when you get right down to it, is there evidence that prayer actually works?
I have a real close relationship with prayer. A couple of years ago, I was in a coma for 30 days.
I supposedly had cancer, humongous tumors, huge. I'm supposed to be dead. I'm the healthiest dead person I know.
Hey, I can honestly say he answers all my prayers. It may not be exactly when I want him to, but he's always right on time.
And I just woke up and did the marathon that year, actually.
Purely almost superficial level, once I prayed that I was going to get an A on a test, and the next day it happened.
I had a financial concern that I was very concerned about and prayed very hard about it for a few days. And then I had a job dropped right in my lap, so it was very nice. I feel like it was a direct answer to prayer.
My friend just beat cancer, and I spent a lot of time praying for her. And she just beat it, and I owe that to God.
I feel like many things I pray for have come true. Usually I pray for the Lord's protective covering over my family and my friends.
Like if I'm scared and I can like say a prayer to God and I like get the power and I'm not scared anymore.
You just ask God for guidance as to how you should be living and the choices that you should be making. Maybe it's career or family or things of that nature. For instance, I just took a new job and I kind of prayed about guidance through that whole process.
Many people count on their involvement with God to help them through their everyday ups and downs. But prayer also seems to work for people in the darkest times, the times of deepest need.
When my mother was dying, I remember going into the lower level of our house and just stretching out on the floor and yelling at God and saying, how can you let this happen? How can you let this happen? And I don't know that I expected anything, but I wanted God to know how I felt about it. But my sense of God's response was that God also wept with me, that God was with me in my grief, and that it was a loss to God that my mother was dying.
Dr. William Harris is a professor of medicine at the University of Missouri School of Medicine. He's the director of a lipid research program at St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City. He participated in a scientific study designed to measure the impact of prayer on the health of hospitalized heart patients.
We decided to use sort of a randomization scheme to place people in a prayed for group or not prayed for group based on whether their medical record number was even or odd. And those of us who were actually organizing and doing the study didn't really know which group, even or odd, was being prayed for. That was something that was determined by one person in private at the beginning of the study, and then that was kept secret throughout the study, so nobody knew who was being prayed for. We had organized a group of about 75 individuals in the community who volunteered to be our, what we call intercessors, people that would do the praying. Those 75 people were organized into teams, kind of randomly placed into teams, 5 people each. So we had 15 prayer teams, as it were. And as a new patient came in the hospital into the coronary care unit, they came up on the computer in the chaplain's office. The chaplain secretary, who was kind of our study coordinator, she would then determine whether their medical record number was even or odd. And we now know that if they were even, she would write their name down on the prayer group list. If they were odd, they'd be written down on the control group list.
Patients on the prayer group list were prayed for once a day for 28 days. Over time, about 500 people ended up in the control group and about 500 in the prayer group. A patient's progress was tracked by assigning a number value to each complication. The more significant the complication, the higher the number assigned. At the end of the study, the hospital charts between these two groups were compared. Remember, a low number meant the patient did well with few complications. A high number meant they didn't do so well. The numbers were added up and compared. The results were remarkable.
We found that the group that had been prayed for had an 11% lower score than the control group. And we did some statistics on that. Basically, we asked the question, what's the chance that this is just a random chance finding? And we found that the chance was about 1 in 25 or so, that this was just a random variation, which really meets and exceeds the standard that we set in biomedical research for statistical significance.
Clearly, evidence exists to support the idea that prayer is effective. We'll have more evidence that prayer works when we continue.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Like William Harris, Larry Dossey is a medical doctor. He's written 8 books, most of which deal with this explosive subject, the healing power of prayer. Larry, welcome to The Evidence.
Dwight, it's great to be with you.
I'm telling you, explosive is the word. Wow. Is this stuff really for real?
Dwight, the key point here is that this is bottom line, no fooling around, solid, bulletproof evidence in my judgment.
This is not fringe medicine.
No. This is beyond what we call anecdote and just patient stories.
Okay.
This is an approach whereby we put prayer to the test like we would a surgical procedure or a drug. And you can hang your hat on some of these studies.
Now, when you say we put prayer to the test, what kind of praying?
Usually, the people who are doing the praying are invited to pray in the way that's most authentic and meaningful for them. Usually, Christian has yes,
Judaism,
Jewish prayer,
Islamic
Hindu,
prayers, Hindu, Buddhist, the whole thing.
You name it.
Okay. Now I've got your book here. This is your newest book, Reinventing Medicine, correct?
That's it.
You you actually spent a couple pages on this incredible study of AIDS victims.
That's right.
You took the toughest human condition and applied prayer. What happened?
Well, the study did look at AIDS, for which there's no medical cure. And the people not only had AIDS, Dwight, they had advanced AIDS. This was not early AIDS.
I see.
And so in the double-blind study, again,
Nobody knows.
No one knows.
Somebody's praying for me or
That's
not
right.
praying. Okay.
People are treated conventionally with the best medical care, but half the people are extended what the researchers call distant healing, which often involved prayer. And so the people who...
Now, when you say distant, excuse me, Larry,
yes.
but you say distant, you could be 100 miles away or 200 miles away, not just across town, or not down the hall.
The other side of the earth.
Is that
These
right?
people in some studies have been separated as far apart as you can get 2 people on the other side of the earth, and the effect still comes through. So in the AIDS study, the people who received the distant healing, also known as prayer, died less frequently. They had fewer what we call AIDS-related illnesses that kill people with AIDS, such as meningitis and pneumonia. They had to go to the doctor less. They had to go into the hospital less, and if they were hospitalized, they got out sooner than the people not receiving the prayer. Their mental state was healthier and better during the treatment period, and I will assure you that if what was being evaluated had not been prayer or distant healing, but a drug, this would have been called a therapeutic miracle.
Really, a breakthrough. By the way, this is getting into medical schools now? People are actually allowing this to become a part of curriculum?
It's spreading.
No. Really? How many medical schools are into this?
Well, 7 years ago, there were only 3 who had anything to do with this. Currently, out of the nation's 125 medical schools, over 60 have actual courses looking at this evidence.
Is that right? Duke University's in on this?
Duke is big. This is the most high-profile study going on in the country now.
Yeah.
And in this study at Duke, this involves people with angioplasty who have to have this done on an emergency basis. That's where they dilate your coronary arteries. So they solicit prayer from prayer groups from around the world for the people in the treatment group. We have Hindu prayer, Buddhist prayer,
If I
Jewish
were in the
prayer.
hospital, I would sure want to be on that prayed group. Huh?
Well, you should want to, because here's what the study shows. The people who receive the prayer have a 50 to 100% fewer side effects from these angioplasty procedures than the people who are just treated ordinarily. You'd better hope that you get involved in the prayed for group.
Yeah, fascinating. Now look at, not only, and this is what is so intriguing to me as I was reading your book, not only is prayer affecting the one being prayed for, but you've got a section here on the effect on the prayer, the one who's doing the praying. Explain.
Yeah, this isn't often looked at, but it should be. You know, if you talk to people who pray and believe that prayer works, and you pick at them and you say, why do you do this? Sooner or later, they'll just sort of throw up their hands and say, well, you know, it kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And so there is one study that looked at the health benefits not only of the group receiving the prayer, but what happened to the people during this study who were actually doing the praying. And they improved equally. The people's health who were doing the praying improved equally compared to the people who were receiving the prayer. So this stuff seems to be good not only for the prayee, but for the prayer as well.
Okay, so I'm watching the evidence right now, and I'm thinking, I got to try this. What should I do? I want to become a prayer. Larry, what do you tell me to do?
Here's what's most important. And if you were praying, you need to look inside your heart and see whether or not you have compassion and love and deep, genuine caring for the person you're praying for. If you have that, your prayer probably is going to work.
Not because there's something emanating from from the organism itself, because you talk about that's been actually squashed, but something else is happening. What's happening?
I'm glad you brought this up. You know, people talk about sending energy when they pray. Forget energy. There's nothing that is apparently sent.
No transmission.
There's nothing seems to be transmitted.
Okay.
Here, we've got to go beyond those old energy concepts about how prayer works. We're into a new way of thinking here. This is tough for people to get over, because when we think about praying, we think about sending something to somebody.
So it comes out of me, all thought consciousness now. It's received by I believe you call it the absolute, is that it?
Well, the absolute
Okay.
is my favorite term for the Almighty, for
All
God.
right.
Listen, we should not get hung up on how this stuff works. What medicine is really good at is saying that it works. We don't really understand how prayer works at a distance. We just have to be honest about that. But you know, often in medicine, Dwight, we know that something works before we have a clue about how it works.
Okay.
We can do the studies and show that it works, but we may be a while in understanding how, but that's all right.
And the critics are standing up and cheering.
Well, the critics, I was a critic. I came around. Many of the critics have sort of been won over by the evidence.
Have they?
I must say there's a vocal, small number of cynics and critics who probably will never make the transition, who think this is just absolute heresy and nonsense. But progress will just sort of leave them in the dust.
Final question.
Yeah.
Your own journey. You started out believing in prayer as a kid. You allude to it in both these books.
Right.
What happened?
I went away to college, fell in love with science,
Yeah.
became an agnostic,
Yeah.
thought that I had finished with all things religious and spiritual. But after becoming a physician, I saw patients who got well with prayer. I bumped into the evidence for the scientific evaluation of prayer. And frankly, I got to the point of saying, look, this looks as if it meets the criteria of science. Are you going to honor this in your own life with your patients and pray for your patients? And I answered that affirmatively. And then I began to follow the research and encourage the research in this area. And so I can't imagine my life working without prayer.
Larry Dossey, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Dwight.
God bless you. What do you think? Would you like some more information? I'd like to invite you to check our interactive website. You can find us at www.theevidence.org. I'll be back in just a moment with some closing thoughts.
Learning English may be the biggest factor in the jobs you can get and the money you can earn. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I want to tell you about Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that teaches you English as you're watching TV. As you watch Hello Channel, you'll see, read, hear, and speak English, and before you know it, you'll be on your way to a better job and a brighter future. All you have to do is say hello.
Anatoly Levitin was a Russian writer and historian who spent years in the Siberian Gulag. You would think that prayer in a place like that would seem frozen to the ground. But Levitin came back with a surprising discovery. The greatest miracle of all is prayer, he would later write. I have only to turn mentally to God, and at once I feel a force that pours into me from somewhere, into my soul, into my whole being. We've looked at hard evidence today indicating that prayer does make things happen. Scientific studies have highlighted the connection between prayer and response in impressive ways. And yet I think it's important to remember that all our prayers have one essential answer: God. Our prayers are much more answerable as a means to that end. I have a feeling that's the secret to those individuals who have reported such dramatic answers to prayer. They are really aiming at something beyond. The greatest thrill of answered prayer isn't necessarily getting what we ask for, but reaching out to touch someone beyond yourself, to touch someone who's always been there. In other words, to commune with the divine. For me, my conversations with God are one of the greatest evidences that God exists. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of the evidence.